I want to give you another update of what we've learned about the investigation into the shooter, attempted assassin of Donald Trump. Thomas Crooks, obviously, was his name. And in this segment, we'll talk about new video of the hours leading up that we haven't yet discussed. We'll talk about his very last. We talked about some of his search history already in a past segment. Now we'll talk about his very last search on his phone. And honestly, some of you may be able to predict what it was. Maybe. But still strange. And then we'll get into photographs that he had. It's sort of chilling photographs on his phone. Again, this is something we haven't yet covered. And I do want to note before getting into any of this, and playing some of that CNN reporting, I want to note that in a past segment, I mentioned this reporting that had been widely discussed about a message being sent by Thomas Crooks that went something like June or July 13th will be my premiere. And that was posted or messaged on a gaming site. That we now know was not him. So it was believed to be him. That was fake. So I want to correct that. The second part of that segment about his internet history, that all still stands. Just to clear that up, in him searching politicians, the Democratic National Convention, and searching about Trump, and then we'll learn more in this segment as well. So with that being said, let's start with the CNN reporting. And again, lots to go through.
The gunman was doing in the days and hours leading up to his attempt to assassinate Donald Trump. CNN's Danny Freeman is in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, near the shooter's home. What can you tell us about this investigation and what is happening at this hour?
Well, Sarah, frankly, as you alluded to, we have learned quite a bit more information in the past 24 hours, thanks to that briefing provided to lawmakers, thanks to a new statement by Butler Township, and of course, thanks to new video obtained by CNN. So I want to talk about some of that video first. Let's take a look at this video obtained by CNN affiliate WTAE in Pittsburgh. It shows, if you can see on your screens right now, a person wearing clothing resembling Thomas Matthew Crooks in front of that building complex where he would ultimately perch on top of one of the buildings.
There's something just chilling. I'll describe for our podcast listeners while I play this again, this time muted. About an hour before Trump comes on stage, rally's already filled up, and you can see Crooks. It seemingly is him walking around where he'd eventually get up on, or one of the buildings around there, and scoping it out. We know that in the days leading up, he had come multiple times and scoped out the event territory, figuring out what he would do. That sort of premeditation, the forethought that has gone into this, is very disturbing. Here's more of this reporting.
Where he would ultimately perch on top of one of the buildings and fire at former President Trump. And this video was taken about an hour before the shooting, so clearly one crucial part of this investigation moving forward. Plus, we also have new dramatic video that was obtained by CNN showing law enforcement officials actually ramming fencing with one of their vehicles in order to gain access to the outer perimeter where the shooter was taking shots at the former president. This video coming just after that shooting took place. Now, Sarah, this all comes as we're getting more information about the larger investigation as well. Law enforcement sources telling CNN that...
And before getting into that, and this next part is super, super interesting, at least to me. It continues on our last conversation, but what are we doing here? Again, for our podcast listeners, there's a fence. Law enforcement officers are trying to respond to the crisis, but they can't get through the fence to get to the event because it's locked. And so then they're ramming a police car
in order to get
into the fence itself or to the gate to try to open it up. How was there not a plan in place for if these local police needed to respond to such a crisis, they would be able to enter the event, have some place to quickly get access, but instead they're ramming a police car to open up the gate. Just a serious lack of planning on their part. Here's more.
Sources telling CNN that there were pictures on the shooter's phone of both President Biden and President Trump, but law enforcement and sources also noted that there were other political figures on his phone as well, including pictures of House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Speaker Mike Johnson, but no threatening language accompanying any of those photos. The other thing that was a piece of new information is that Crooks apparently has searched for information on major depression disorder, but still law enforcement officials say that there's no evidence that he himself had any any diagnosis. And the last thing, Sarah, that I'll note is from the House briefing, legislative sources were telling us that the shooter actually visited that rally site twice before the shooting, and cell phone data shows that he was at that rally site at least 70 minutes prior to the shooting. Sarah?
Wow. And what we've observed before addressing the photos part of this, what we've observed is that people were already concerned about this guy, sounding the alarms about him. Law enforcement was suspicious of him 20 minutes before, and he was there 70 minutes before. And if he was scoping it out in the days leading up, and then in an hour before, I thought, and we'll talk about this more later when we talk about the Secret Service scrutiny, but I thought that anyone there was sort of being closely monitored by Secret Service, that they would have cameras all over the place. Every time I've been at these rallies to interview people, I have the thought of there must just be so much security footage being gathered, so many eyes on everyone, and if you look slightly suspicious, you're going to be questioned. I assumed that. And it's stunning that that doesn't seem to be at least the case here. And a part of what's bringing onto Secret Service even more criticism is they're strangely pointing fingers. And I do want to note, before going back to the photo thing, that people should be held accountable, of course, but let's not jump to conspiracy theories. MAGA, of course, quickly pushing this was an inside job type of stuff, or they were purposely making mistakes. Let's follow the facts, and where mistakes were made, who was responsible for them. Both accountability needs to happen, maybe resignations, and changes going forward. But why people have the need to always jump to conspiracy theories, I don't know. But before talking about the Secret Service stuff a little bit more, he reported on here that you had photographs of Hakeem Jeffries, of Mike Johnson, Fani Willis, Rudy Giuliani, Trump, Biden, searches for the dates of the Democratic National Convention, the Republican National Convention. And given his background, Thomas Crooks, as a registered Republican, coming from a conservative family, Trump signs in his yard, being super pro-gun, a part of a gun club, having his pro-gun influencer shirt on, and then searching for dates and events of people from both sides, we are now becoming more convinced, or at least I am, that, as I talked about more extensively in that last segment on his internet history, it seems this is someone who, through whatever means, in whichever event he could find that would be, weird to use this term, but most convenient for him, and this rally ended up being really close to where he lived, he was trying to make global headlines, to somehow, in whatever demented, deranged way you could imagine in a shooter's like this head, was trying to make a name for himself, and doing so by going after prominent people. But MAGA trying to make it something just based on the facts it doesn't seem to be, which is he was inspired by anti-Trump rhetoric to go after Trump specifically, as opposed to he was searching up all these different prominent people events, prominent political figure events that would make global headlines. And that seemed to be more what he was pursuing, as we've seen with other people engaging in these sorts of acts of terror, if it should be defined as that, or these events where they kill people. So, other detail, the Daily Beast reports the last search Thomas Crooks made on his cell phone before attempting to assassinate Donald Trump was for pornography. So, that's that. But I do want to show you the Secret Service president, or director, I should say, the director of the Secret Service, was confronted at the Republican National Convention. And while we're hearing bizarre rhetoric within MAGA that's saying it's because she's a woman that this happened and stuff to that effect, that's crazy. Setting that aside and making sure we're understanding that's not reasonable, it's perfectly fair to question her as the director of the Secret Service about what happened here.
Doing today
This
on the
was
call.
an assassination attempt. You owe the people answers. You owe President Trump this.
We are in extraordinary times. A confrontation you saw there between GOP senators and the head of the Secret Service on the floor of the Republican convention. The senators absolutely furious after they were briefed that the shooter had been identified as suspicious a full 19 minutes before he tried to assassinate Donald Trump. The lawmakers demanded to know why the Secret Service still allowed the former president to take the stage at his Pennsylvania rally on Saturday. Take a listen.
So while we're going to hear MAGA Republicans, as we've already heard, using these failures as justification for conspiracy theory, see, there's an attempt by the administration to let Trump get hurt, or this is because of DEI, woman, and all of that we need to just denounce and push aside. The rage about how you could identify someone as suspicious 20 minutes before a shooting and not prevent the shooting, and you're being warned minutes before too by spectators saying, look, he's on the roof, he has a gun. You can be mad about that for sure and want accountability without being crazy irrational like we're hearing from some. And so I myself am upset because I've gone to a bunch of these political events, whether it be a Biden event or when Pete Buttigieg was running president and I was going through Iowa primary events, a Pete Buttigieg event, or a Trump event. You have to, for people to be able to engage properly in our democratic process, you have to have the assumption of safety. If the rhetoric and the heat in this political moment is what it is, especially, people need to know they're still going to be safe whenever they go and participate in democracy. However much we disagree with the stances that the individuals at these rallies have for Trump, or however much they disagree with a Biden rally, across the board, people need to feel safe, not worrying about a bullet hitting them, as happened to a rally goer who died. And we have to be able to work out through our democratic process differences. And now we're realizing it doesn't seem the shooter was politically motivated, but some other twisted ambition. But yet, and still, the reason why it's so important that Secret Service here is questioned. And we do see accountability. And we do have the questions answered as to what these failures were. And what changes are going to be made to prevent something like this again is because of the importance of this sort of participation and the importance of people knowing that when they show up to an event like this, they're going to be safe. And that should apply to everyone. I'm also just bringing my own personal experience to this, that now knowing that Secret Service isn't as on top of these events as I thought they were freaks me out a little bit. Because one of the reasons I'd go to these obscure locations where a bunch of Trump supporters, if they were to have known who I was, would not like me. One of the reasons I felt so comfortable is because there's so much law enforcement here. They're watching every little thing. I'm going to be fine. Apparently not, okay? And so on a very personal level, I have that aggravation. But then more broadly, there's a fundamental principle at issue here. And making sure you have that safety and proper security is important for the ongoing democratic process that we want so badly to preserve, which is a part of why we're engaging in our democratic process opposing MAGA, but doing so in a way that is fully peaceful. Let me know what you thought of all that in the comments. If you want to get an extra episode of the show daily, you can do so by clicking the join button below.